Today we are going to discuss the play The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster. It belongs to the genre of Renaissance drama in English and is usually set alongside the plays of William Shakespeare as well as that of Christopher Marlowe. John Webster will be introduced to us as a playwright today. In addition to that, we will be studying the sources of the play. We will be analyzing the setting of the play and also the main characters within the basically means that we will be looking at the characters of the Duchess, her two brothers, and Antonio, her husband, and Bosola, the main protagonist of the play. First of all, an introduction to John Webster. John Webster, alongside Christopher Marlowe, is supposed to have been the only major playwrights who could have challenged Shakespeare to his position as the preeminent dramatist of Renaissance drama in English. The few details that we know of him include the fact that he was the son of a carriage maker. He wrote his early plays in collaboration with other playwrights, but later on his reputation rests solely on two plays of which he was the sole author, The White Devil and The Duchess of Malfi, our text for today. Both are tragedies and both are very powerful explorations of the nature of women's sexuality as well as corruption and depravity in human nature. As the great Shakespearean plays, these two continue to be studied and performed even today, whereas a lot of other plays of the Renaissance times have fallen into disfavor. The Duchess of Malfi is particularly interesting because it has as its title a woman's, which is an extremely rare event in Renaissance drama. This will be apparent if we were to look at the titles of Shakespeare's plays. He has hardly any play in which you have the woman's name included in the title, the exceptions being Romeo and Juliet and Antony and Cleopatra. The other examples of plays during the Renaissance which have a woman's name in the title include Marlowe's Dido, Queen of Carthage, and William Rowley's The Witch of Edmonton, which again does not have a name precisely, but nonetheless refers to a female figure. The Duchess of Malfi, interestingly, is never named in the play, in that she does not have a given name, a first name. She is always known only as either the Duchess or Madam. And even at the end, as she approaches her death, she refers to herself also famously as, "I am Duchess of Malfi still." The sources of the play, they are supposed to be based upon an actual incident which occurred in Italy in the early 1500s. The first reference to it in literature comes to us via Bandello in his novella of 1554. Though Webster would not have been familiar with Bandello's novels, he might have had some familiarity with the story as it was retold by Belleforest in his Tragic Histories of 1565. However, the text that is definitely known to have been well acquainted with by Webster is the text called The Palace of Pleasure by William Paynter, in which a version of the story was published in 1567. This story is the one which Webster would have been best acquainted with, and this is evidenced also by the fact that more than 40 phrases of the text from William Paynter's Palace of Pleasure are known to have been found in the play by Webster himself. There are certain differences between these three sources of the text. The first one, which was Bandello's novella, was known to have been written in a factual way. There was no additional trimming to the story. By the time Belleforest came to write the story, he added a certain moral tone to it. He pointed out morals regarding the virtues or the vices of the principal characters, and he made it in accordance with the decorum and propriety of the times. Paynter replicated a lot of these facts. He went along with the morals, he went along with the virtues, and he went along with what was seen as acceptable behavior, and therefore then he was able to draw a moral as well as condemn the behavior of the Duchess within the play. Webster, while he did take on much from Paynter's Palace of Pleasure, in fact he might even have been accused of plagiarism if it had been in this time and day and age, yet even as he took on more than 40 accurate phrases from the book, he also added a lot more. He changed it, so it is not just a replication but more in the nature of an adaptation. He changed it by collapsing timelines, by changing characters, by collapsing many characters into one. So where in the original stories we have lots of villains, here we have Bosola as premier villain of the play. In addition, He changed Bosola himself by making him a sympathetic character towards the end of the play, where initially Bosola was just a villain. Here he turns into somebody who tries to take revenge on the Aragonian brothers for what they did to their sister, the Duchess of Malfi. Thus, what we have in Painter's story as more or less a moral kind of story is here transformed into a story wherein you have all the elements of a revenge tragedy. In fact, the madness that is seen in many of the plays of revenge tragedy which we know in the Elizabethan age is also seen over here. In addition, we have several elements which exude horror. In fact, today The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster is seen more as a family drama with certain Gothic overtones rather than only as a revenge tragedy as it was once seen. Now we will look at the setting of the play. The play is set in Italy, in the courts of, first of all, Malfi, and secondly, Milan, the court of the Aragonian brother Ferdinand, who is the Duke of Milan. In between, we also go into the palace of the Cardinal, who is the other Aragonian brother. The reason why the English playwrights chose to set their plays in Italy or Spain rather than in England is very clear. It is because when they wish to show cruelty, depravity, wickedness, when they wish to show licentiousness on the parts of the characters, they prefer to locate it in a foreign locale. By doing so, they escape the censure and the punishment which might have come their way if they had shown wicked rulers in England, because then it would have been seen as an attack upon the English monarchy. The play opens in a court, that of the Duchess of Malfi. Her husband is recently deceased, and she is at the court in the company of her two brothers, the Duke Ferdinand, who is the Duke of Milan, and the Cardinal, who is once again not given a name through much of the play. The cruelty and the corruption of this court, the court of Malfi, is offset right for us in the beginning by what Antonio tells us about the court of France, where we have a judicious king, and the court itself is a place of virtue and a place of goodness and purity. Even as Antonio finishes telling us about all of this, what we see is a court wherein the brothers are determined to spy upon their sister, and so they appoint a spy, Bosola, who will keep an eye on her and report all her doings to them in their own courts. What we see is a place wherein they are obsessed about her sexuality and her doings, and where we see that though she is the ruler, she is not allowed to rule because they overrule all that she determines. As the play progresses, we move from the court of Malfi through the court of Milan to the Cardinal's palace, and we see each of these locations as places where corruption flourishes. Especially is this outrageous in the case of the Cardinal's palace, because the Cardinal, being an official of the Catholic Church, is seen as being somebody who is also not just corrupt but also venal. He has an affair with one of the courtiers' wives in his palace. He manages to kill her. He has a lot of devious plans, and instead of being a man of peace and of God, he is also a warrior. So what we see is that by virtue of setting the play in Italy, Webster makes it possible for him to comment upon not just court politics and intrigues, but also about the church and its venality and corruption. Wealth and sex are seen as the two main motivations for all the characters within the play, whether they are cardinals, whether they are dukes, whether they are duchesses. Anybody and everybody is interested in wealth, position, and sex. The plot of the play is very simple. It begins at the point where the Duchess of Malfi, recently widowed, is now regent of the dukedom. Her eldest son, or her only son, from the Duke of Malfi, is too young to be the duke, and so she rules in his place. Her brothers have come at this point to advise her as to her future course of action. Both of them work upon her, telling her in no uncertain terms that she should not marry again. And to make that certain, they also appoint Bosola, a spy, in her household, so that they will know all that she does. The Duchess herself, young, beautiful, and wanting to be loved and married, waits for their departure waits, having told them that she will not marry again. The minute they are out of sight, she then sets about wooing Antonio, who is a courtier in her palace, and then she marries him. A secret marriage which is known to nobody other than her maid, Cariola, her trusted maid. Once the marriage is performed, we pass through a period of time fairly quickly, a period wherein she has 3 pregnancies, gives birth to 3 children. The children grow up, and then comes the point at which all hell breaks loose on the stage in Webster's play. Because what happens is that the brothers have come to know about her children, though nobody knows who the father of those children is, and they come to her court, especially Ferdinand. He surprises her in her bedroom, and the discovery is nearly made as to who might be fathering these children upon her. At that point, Antonio and she part ways. They both flee from Malfi. However, even as they flee, they take their children with them. So Antonio takes the eldest son, whereas the Duchess of Malfi takes with her the other 2 children. Once they are separated, the brothers then take control of the Duchess once again, return her to Malfi, but return her as a prisoner. At this point, we once again are privileged to see the corruption of the Catholic Church as well, because we are told that the Pope himself, bowing to the wishes of the Cardinal, acknowledges that she is no longer Duchess. She is sent back as a private prisoner. At that point, then the Duchess of Malfi's stature is reduced. As a private citizen, she is taken back to Malfi, imprisoned there, subjected to various psychological tortures, until finally Bassola is hired to kill her and her children and her maid. From that point onwards, the play once again takes another turn, because what we see is that Bassola himself, thwarted by Ferdinand, not paid by him for services rendered, decides to take revenge upon the brothers. His revenge is not only for himself, but also for the Duchess, who he sees now as an innocent victim of the brothers' pride and greed. Determined to avenge himself and the Duchess, he proceeds to the Aragonian brothers, and there you have the final act wherein we see them, all of them, being destroyed. Bassola himself kills the 2 brothers and is himself killed. But before this, in a twist, in an ironical twist to the play, Bassola by mistake kills Antonio, who tries to come and seek a certain reconciliation between himself and his wife's brothers. Having killed Antonio, Bassola sees no further point in living and is himself dead at the end of the play. The final twist in the play comes when Delio, friend to Antonio, decides that now he will further Antonio and the Duchess's son as the new Duke of Malfi, superseding the earlier son from the Duke of Malfi, who would in his turn have inherited the dukedom. Now we will examine the main characters of this play. We have actually 3 who are singularly important in the play, beginning of course with the Duchess of Malfi herself. In addition to her, Antonio and Bassola are the 2 main characters within the play. But forming a cluster is also the Aragonian brothers, who together have a significant role to play in them. Now, the Duchess is of course the one most important female character we have in the play, but in addition to her, we also have several other female characters. The next most important would be Cariola, her maid. Then you have Julia, the woman with whom the Cardinal is having an affair, who is married to one of his courtiers, and we also have a midwife within the play. Out of all these women, the Duchess is the most important. As we know, the play is named after her, and she is the central character. It follows her life, her trials, tribulations, and ends after her death. The Duchess, though the protagonist of the play, it is difficult to determine whether she is a strong woman or a weak woman. It is of course further problematized because what we see of the Duchess is that she mixes her private persona and her public persona. In her public persona, she is the ruler of Malfi. She is the regent for her son who is a minor and therefore cannot rule and is never seen on stage and is only referred to a couple of times. In his place, she rules. So in effect, she is the sole ruler of the dukedom of Malfi, which she has inherited from her husband, the dead Duke of Malfi. Before we meet the Duchess, as the play starts, we hear Antonio, who speaks of her both in terms of her beauty, her physical beauty, as well as her moral beauty and virtue. The Duchess of Malfi is seen usually as somebody who is perfect, perfection personified, because she is not only unutterably beautiful and charming, she is also supposed to be perfectly good. This is in stark contrast to her two brothers, Ferdinand and the Cardinal, who are both seen to be monsters of depravity and who are recognized to be such by all those around them within the play. Yet when we first see the Duchess, she is being harangued by her brothers, the two monsters. She is being told about the fact that young women like her who have been widowed are often swayed by their blood to indulge in sexual activities with those whom they are not licensed to indulge in with. Right? She is being told that she should not be allowed to do so and that she should under no condition marry again. In fact, the Duchess at that point comes across as a dissembler because she says that she will never marry again, only to do so the minute her brothers leave the court of Malfi. Thus, what we see of the Duchess does not actually equate with what we have been told about the Duchess. If the Duchess is seen as being somebody who lies, who then does exactly what she chooses, what we've been told is that she is this perfect paragon of virtue, which is not really true. Also, her wooing and her marriage to Antonio is itself problematic. She woos him, claiming that she loves him. She marries him, takes him into her bedroom, and soon after that is pregnant, has 3 children in quick succession. And yet, she prefers to keep this marriage secret. The very fact of keeping her marriage secret can be seen as due in part to her fear of her brothers, but also due in part to the fact that if she were to announce a marriage, she might no longer then be able to be the Duchess of Malfi. She would then be the wife of Antonio and then no longer eligible to be the ruler of Malfi. So is it that her public and her private desires clash? Her public persona as the Duchess of Malfi clashes with her private desire to be Antonio's wife. She tries to have both. She tries to have her cake and eat it too because she marries Antonio, but at the same time, she retains the title and her position as the ruler of Malfi. She veers also between being this helpless woman, which is what she characterizes herself as, and also the authoritarian ruler of the Dukedom of Malfi. So when she marries Antonio, she decides that she conducts her own marriage. She does not need the clergy, she does not need the church, she does not need public acknowledgement of her marriage. She is both the main participant in the marriage as well as the person who conducts the marriage. And her only witness is Cariola, whom she trusts with all her life. Incredibly enough, even though her marriage is never made public, her children are. So the entire dukedom, her entire kingdom, as well as everybody in neighboring states knows of the fact that she has 3 children. What nobody knows of is whether she is married or not. So she is willing to incur public disdain, public contempt from the majority of the citizens, even as she continues to be a private person who is then madly in love with Antonio and is married to him. And she does not have a problem with her children being called illegitimate, which actually seems rather problematic as well. But in addition to all of these, in her public persona as a ruler, she does not seem to have much control over her state either. This is first demonstrated for us when her brothers bring Basola into her state and give him a job over there so that he can spy upon her. It is not she who takes the decision, it is the brothers who do so. Later on, she also proves that she cannot judge character very well because she tells Basola, her enemy and the spy in her palace, that it is Antonio she is married to, which of course gives the brothers the weapon they need. And from that point onwards, her downfall begins. But if the Duchess remains problematic till the point at which her downfall begins, she achieves great nobility in the final few scenes wherein she appears. In her misfortune, once she has been imprisoned, she then achieves a stature which is hitherto unknown for her in the play. She is noble and she is restrained. In addition to that, she demonstrates pride because she says that whatever happens, I am Duchess of Malfi still. In addition to that, at the absolute end of her life, when Basola is waiting to execute her, she achieves distinction by virtue of humility. because at that point she kneels and says, "Heaven gates are not so highly arched as princes' palaces. They that enter there must go upon their knees," demonstrating that though on earth she might have been a prince, at heaven's gates she remains a private citizen like anybody else. And it is in that stature, as she dies, demonstrating humility akin to a certain pride in who she is, that she achieves greatness. The Duchess of Malfi is seen, the character, the Duchess of Malfi, is seen as being somebody who is either loved or hated. Feminist critics today find her problematic and yet interesting, because she shows the juxtaposition of the public and the private, and also the difficulty in reconciling these two roles. We come now to Antonio and Bosola, two men who are seen to be akin because they are characters who belong to a certain class, they're characters who seek a certain future, and they're both, of course, characters who die. Yet they are also seen as very different from each other. Antonio and Bosola are both of them people who are seeking advancement. Antonio has been prior to this in the court of France, and from there he has come here to the court of Malfi and has got a job here as steward. From being steward, he of course advances himself and becomes the husband of the Duchess of Malfi. But he also becomes the secret husband of the Duchess of Malfi. There is no way that he can have a public role as her husband. He remains the steward and he remains her husband, but always only in secret. Antonio is seen as being this good, noble citizen. He, of course, has not got a streak of evil in him, as is demonstrated to us right at the beginning of the play, when her two brothers, the Duchess's two brothers, try to determine whether they should employ him as a spy upon her. And then they come to the conclusion that he is too good and therefore he will not serve their purposes. Thus it becomes necessary for them to employ Bosola. But even as Antonio is seen to be good, Antonio is also seen to have not much moral courage, as evidenced by the fact that he is willing to keep his marriage a secret because he fears that if the Duchess's brothers come to know of it, then they will kill him. And this, of course, can be interpreted in a more sympathetic light as well, by claiming that he does so because the Duchess herself would be in jeopardy if she were to know, if it were to be known that she is married to him. But as the play progresses, what we see is that Antonio is willing to serve merely as the secret husband, fathering children upon the Duchess, and not really expecting very much for himself. So his nobility of character is slightly questionable, to say the least. After the secret is discovered and after the Duchess and he have parted ways, he with the eldest child and she with the other two children, so that they will all remain safe and hopefully one day be reconciled to each other, Antonio finally demonstrates his last little bit of courage. He decides that he will go to the Duchess's brothers and try to be reconciled to them. However, this is also seen as dicey in a certain sense, because when he does go there, he is killed, unfortunately, ironically by mistake, not by the brothers but by Bosola himself. So Antonio's life therefore then poses a different kind of problem, that does it have any worth, A, and B, is it possible that even though he is good, he cannot really change events or change the course of the way things go, because he does not have the moral strength, the courage and the determination that is necessary to change events. In contrast to this, we have Bosola. Bosola, who is seen as being evil. In fact, he was first sent to the galleys because he committed a murder on behalf of the cardinal, for which the cardinal refused to take responsibility, and therefore Bosola had to take the responsibility. Having been sent to the galleys, having been released from them and returned, he comes to the brothers once again, because he sees them as the only way he has of advancing himself within this world. So in an aristocratic world, it is necessary then to have friends in high places who will advance you if you want to be advanced. You cannot do it by virtue of your own qualities. Bosola then once again asks them for employment. At this point in time, it is Ferdinand who employs him. Bosola does all that he can in pursuit of Ferdinand's aims, only to be told by Ferdinand, once he has murdered the Duchess, that he will die for this, not be paid for it. It is at this point that Bosola turns. So Bosola, who had till this point has been seen as more or less an entirely evil character, even if sympathetic because of the fact that he himself has been betrayed by those in power, from this point onwards turns around. He then becomes the good guy. He determines that he will avenge himself and the Duchess, and he will kill the Aragonian brothers. He also decides that he will save Antonio. There is, of course, the usual irony in the fact that having determined to save Antonio, he then is the one who kills him. But he also effects his revenge because he is able to destroy both the brothers and in the end is also destroyed. So Webster, is he then making this comment that it actually serves nothing, that cruelty and depravity are what win? To see cruelty and depravity in action, we should look at the characters of the Duchess's brothers, Ferdinand, who is her twin, and the Cardinal, who is their brother. Ferdinand is the one who is most determined that the Duchess should never marry again. There has long been a tradition of criticism which tries to discover why it is that he would not have the Duchess marry again. The usual answers are divided into two clusters. One is to do with the fact that if she were not to marry again, then they would inherit, the brothers would inherit her wealth, and therefore they would be rich. So it is reduced to a question of greed, a desire for more wealth. The other one is a more complicated one because it focuses on the fact that Ferdinand, especially, not so much the Cardinal, Ferdinand focuses upon his sister's sexuality. He is constantly consumed with visions of her indulging in sex with various people, and therefore it is thought that Ferdinand has about him something incestuous, an incestuous desire for his sister, and this is what causes him to deny her the opportunity of getting married again. Later on, once he knows that she has had 3 children, though he does not know who the father is, he visits her in her bedroom and speaks to her in words which reduce her to being a beast in the matter of her sexuality. He calls her a whore, he calls her a hyena, and he refuses to see her ever again. And thus we see that the motivation for the 2 brothers and their doings, it's itself conflicted. We cannot really be certain what exactly it is that causes them to behave in the way they do. The usual answer would be to say that they are wicked and cruel and depraved, licentious and corrupt. And that is the nature of the courts which they rule. The Cardinal in his palace is also seen as being licentious in addition to being corrupt. In addition to being a man of God as a Cardinal, he is also somebody who regularly goes to war. He is supposed to be a great soldier and a great general, but he is also a man who cuckolds his own courtiers and is willing to kill without any remorse. He kills his own mistress towards the end of the play. Thus we see the courts which are the central settings of the Duchess of Malfi, all of them are places where licentiousness flourishes, where depravity flourishes. So these are not spaces where something that is light and wholesome can be enjoyed. Instead, these are places where darkness reigns, and this darkness is intensified through the course of the play, even as it is also eliminated by the end of the play. But we are not given a conclusion wherein light comes back into the play.